Beethoven's favorite works include Mozart's Requiem, Handel's Messiah, and Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet.
Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercising my first amendment rights vlog style. Been a while since I've worn this shirt. Anyway, it's time for another episode of What's Wrong With.
What's wrong with me? You wanna know what's wrong with me? I can ask you the exact same thing. What's wrong with me?
Today we're talking about one of the biggest rock bands of all time, as well as a band I hold very near and dear to my heart, Bon Jovi. Along with the likes of Poison, Aerosmith when they made their big comeback with Permanent Vacation, Guns N' Roses, and of course Def Leppard, Bon Jovi was one of the bands that defined mainstream hard rock in the second half of the 80s, and they're also a band I point to whose success influenced the late 80s glam explosion. You don't need me to tell you, but Bon Jovi was one of the biggest deals in music at the time. They were such a big deal that when they were playing at the Moscow Music Peace Festival in 1989, the first rock show to take place in Russia, which also featured Motley Crue, Skid Row, Ozzy Osbourne, Cinderella, the Scorpions, and the Russian glam band. Many of the bands, Crue in particular, felt upstaged by Jovi. But unlike a number of 80s bands, Bon Jovi have actually been able to sustain their popularity and relevance during a time that a good chunk of classic rock and classic metal fans view as those genres' dead period. What's usually the case with bands from the 80s is that decade is their peak, and by 1991, when grunge and alternative rock became the popular rock styles, they basically fall off the radar either by breaking up / going on hiatus or releasing material that doesn't fare well commercially or even critically. But that didn't happen with Bon Jovi, and I'll talk more about that later. Given that they were such a huge deal in rock, it's not at all a surprise that Bon Jovi was one of the bands included in the big collection of compilations my uncle gave to me as a kid, and I for sure loved what I heard. Bon Jovi has the kind of sound that I like to view as a sweet spot between poppy and hard. If there's anything this band's great at, it's coming up with fun hooks and having some great guitar work to go along with that. Kind of similar to glam if you think about it, though Jovi isn't exactly a band I categorize as such. I'd more so compare them with bands like Night Ranger and Journey. Jon Bon Jovi, or Bon Jovi, is a great singer and great writer. Like I said, one of Jovi's biggest assets is their ability to create great hooks, and Jon is someone I view as a master of this craft, and his voice definitely complements this kind of writing. As much as I view a song like Livin' on a Prayer as overplayed and something I don't think I need to hear anymore, one thing I always remember is that these elements are a big part of what helped that song to maintain its popularity today, to the point where VH1 listed it as the greatest song of the 80s. Though I should give some credit where it's due. A big component of what helped Bon Jovi to blow up with their third album Slippery When Wet in 1986 was working with a hired songwriter I mentioned in my Best Glam Metal Bands You've Never Heard of video, Desmond Child. Many of Bon Jovi's best known songs, including Bad Medicine, Keep the Faith, Born to Be My Baby, You Give Love a Bad Name, and of course Livin' on a Prayer, were co-written with him. This of course got Desmond a lot of recognition and a big reputation as a hitmaker, to the point where the likes of Kiss, Aerosmith, Joan Jett, Michael Bolton, Alice Cooper, and even Rat reached out to him to give them a hit or two. And with Rat, Jon Bon Jovi was also brought in to supply backing vocals on their song Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. This move is really not surprising since their popularity was sort of tanking, so working with Desmond Child and having the star power of Jon Bon Jovi attached to their 1990 album Detonator was sort of a last-ditch effort to have it be a big smash, which is sort of why I view that album as not exactly a favorite as far as Rat's albums go. Getting back to Jovi, I like the flavor David Bryan brings to the fold with his keyboard parts, and Tico Torres is very tasteful with his drumming and can come out with some pretty cool sounding fills. The bassist in Jovi's classic lineup was a guy called Alec John Such, who basically does as bassists do. Yeah, this is usually the thing I have the least to say about, I'm sorry.
I'm very angry.
Their current bassist is a guy named Hugh McDonald, who was a session musician on their albums These Days, Crush, and
Have a Nice Day,
and finally became an official member on the next album, Lost Highway. Must have been a long initiation process. But my favorite member has always been, of course, their guitarist Richie Sambora. I wouldn't exactly call him a virtuoso, but he's a very skilled lead player and is capable of getting pretty shreddy in some songs. I've always enjoyed how his solos crescendo and build up to a climax in a way that's really tasteful. It's such a great fit for this kind of music, similar to what Journey had with Neil Schon and Night Ranger with Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson, and that's why I see him as another one of the band's best assets. Plus, as overplayed as Livin' on a Prayer is, I also can't deny how cool his usage of talkbox is, especially here. And it might just be part of the reason I own a talkbox myself. It's unfortunate that Sambora isn't in the band at this point in time. He had just left the band by the time I saw Bon Jovi live in 2013, but his replacement Phil X is absolutely insane. Wouldn't call him as tasteful as Sambora, but from what I remember seeing from him in a couple of my senpai Tyler Larson's videos, his technique is really mind-blowing, so I'd say Jovi lucked out with him. That said, I mainly listened to Jovi's first 5 albums, my favorite being their second album, 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit, which I view as quite underrated. It has probably their most glammy sound before they fine-tuned it for Slippery When Wet, and it has my favorite song of Jovi's, Only Lonely. Other songs I consider favorites are, on the self-titled, Roulette, She Don't Know Me, Shot Through the Heart, not to be confused with You Give Love a Bad Name, Burnin' for Love, and Get Ready. On 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit, In and Out of Love, Tokyo Road, Hardest Part is the Night, Always Run to You, and To the Fire. On Slippery When Wet, You Give Love a Bad Name, Social Disease, Raise Your Hands, I'd Die for You, Never Say Goodbye, which I included in my favorite Power Ballads video, and Wild in the Streets. On New Jersey, Lay Your Hands on Me, Bad Medicine, Born to Be My Baby, Blood on Blood, Homebound Train, I'll Be There for You, the song I always dedicate to my late dog Fenway, and 99 in the Shade. And on Keep the Faith, the title track, In These Arms, the epic Dry County, Woman in Love, Fear, I Want You, and Blame It on the Love of Rock and Roll. And also there's the 2 tracks they recorded for their first compilation album, Crossroad, Someday I'll Be Saturday Night and Always, which are both great. Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora also both released solo albums in the early 90s, while the band were taking a sort of hiatus between New Jersey and Keep the Faith, both of which I'd recommend checking out. Sambora's album Stranger in This Town is a more straightforward hard rock album than what Jovi is known for, and Jon's album Blaze of Glory is more in line with Jovi's sound. It's actually also a soundtrack album for the film Young Guns 2, in wake of Jon opting to write an all-new theme for the movie when approached by Emilio Estevez to have Wanted Dead or Alive be the theme. Pretty fitting, considering Jon actually loved playing cowboy as a kid, and thus has a considerable amount of songs about that subject matter, leading me to make a reference to it in Worst Songs of 2019 when talking about Old Town Road. Now it's time to debunk la plaque.
And a whopping 57% said they would kick Bon Jovi square in the balls if given the opportunity.
One thing that comes to mind when talking about problems with Bon Jovi is their changes in style ever since 1995's These Days, an album known for being noticeably lighter than the 5 albums preceding it. I'm not the hugest fan of Bon Jovi's albums post Keep the Faith, but I don't view them as too huge of a stretch. These songs are decent enough rock material. That said, the one album that's understandable if you find it to be a big stretch from their early work is Lost Highway from 2007. This is the album where they incorporated country into their sounds, as this was around the time when pop country started becoming an extremely marketable niche. It's definitely noticeable, though I have a bit of a soft spot for the song I Love This Town, since I remember the song being used for promos on TBS for the MLB postseason that my brother would always watch, and I think I remember it being used in a commercial for Bud Light or something as well. The main thing I respect about these albums is that they didn't tank. They aren't the kind of albums Todd and the Shadows would talk about on Train Records, and I don't view any of them as comeback albums either, since, well, Jovi never left. They were one of a very small number of mainstream bands from the 80s that didn't lose relevance in the 90s or 2000s. They adapted to the times in a way that wasn't too jarring or alienating like what Metallica did at the time, and even managed to have some hits like This Ain't a Love Song, It's My Life, Have a Nice Day, and Who Says You Can't Go Home, which made it onto the Billboard year-end chart in 2006. It might not be the hugest on these albums, but I respect the roles they played in sustaining Jovi's career. Speaking of This Ain't a Love Song, another thing that comes to mind is the argument that they are all about the love songs. I really cannot argue with that, because they certainly do have about as many love songs as Stevie Wolf has videos about the creepy onion man. But you gotta admit, Jon Bon Jovi is damn good at writing a pretty great love song and power ballad. A notable thing about Jon is that he married his high school sweetheart Dorothea Hurley in 1989 and is still with her to this day. This leads me to think that ballads like Never Say Goodbye and I'll Be There For You were written from a place of genuine sincerity. The former actually makes references to high school misadventures like
Remember days of skipping school, remember at the prom that night.
And it leads me to wonder if these were things he actually did with Dorothea. And it's because of that I view Bon Jovi's power ballads as being more genuine and sincere than a lot of love songs out there, let alone the many power ballads that were flooding the airwaves during the late 80s glam explosion. But along with that complaint, I think the biggest complaint that Bon Jovi gets is that they're giant and corporate, or the Nickelback of their time or something. Now, if you guys don't already know, or you haven't seen the What's Wrong With I made on them a few years ago in what I view as one of my best videos in this series, I like Nickelback, so the comparison doesn't exactly offend me. But apart from musical nuances between their sounds, like Nickelback having a more grungy sound, one big key difference between those two bands is that Bon Jovi isn't a band that's so cliche that they've become a meme like Nickelback has, or rather was, since people are now saying they've passed their torch over to Trapped. And you aren't incorrect about Jovi being giant. Being huge in their respective time is another thing they have in common with Nickelback. They're one of the most giant rock bands around right now and have been for decades. But apart from what I said in the word analysis about being mainstream, about how that's not really a bad thing in and of itself, I have two stories I want to tell you. The first is something I remember learning about when I read a bit of Jon Bon Jovi's biography. Being that Bon Jovi are from New Jersey, Jon was close friends and drinking buddies with Dave the Snake Sapa, one of the guitarists in Skid Row, who are also from New Jersey. They made a pact with each other that if one of them got big, they would help the other out. So after Jovi blew up with Slippery When Wet, Jon not only helped Cinderella get signed, but he also kept true to his word and helped Skid Row get signed so Sebastian Bach could melt the hearts of metal chicks everywhere. And while neither of those bands were as popular as Bon Jovi at the time, nor are they as remembered these days, they both released platinum-selling albums and both got their share of success. Had it not been for Jon Bon Jovi, who's to say Skid Row would have been the first metal band to have an album debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 200. This is what I like to call a Still DRE moment. In the song Still DRE, Dr. Dre raps about how in the 7 years since releasing the colossal bombshell hallmark known as The Chronic, while he has become a big shot in the world of rap, being a mentor for Snoop Dogg, directing the short film Murder Was the Case that Snoop co-stars in with Charlie Murphy, may God rest his soul, having a guest verse on a big hit single like California Love by Tupac, signing Eminem, and producing hip-hop classics like Doggy Style and the Slim Shady LP, he hasn't lost touch with the scene he came from. The line in the song that always jumps out at me is "Still got love for the streets," which says to me that Dre never forgot his roots, and the success didn't go to his head like you'd expect with someone of that celebrity status. So I use this term to refer to someone becoming famous and helping the little guy, which is exactly what Jon Bon Jovi did for his old friend. Kind of similar to how even though I'm not a fan of Nirvana, I respect how their success gave Kurt Cobain a platform to help bands from his scene get recognition. It also kind of relates to why talent scouting is a career path I'm interested in, and why if I ever become famous, I want to be able to do that for bands I've come to know and care about. Similarly, it's also why I like taking opportunities to shout out friends of mine on YouTube that are smaller. I might not be a particularly big YouTuber myself, but I like the idea of having that impact on someone. There was a time when guys like Official GATG, Take Shot Action, and Nate Talks to You gave me some plugs before I reached my first 1,000 subscribers. I'd love to do the same for people that I see potential in and that I want to see succeed, like Jon Bon Jovi did for Cinderella and Skid Row. The other story is something I want everyone watching this to remember if you're ever feeling down and unsure of yourself. Jon had a cousin named Tony Bon Jovi who had a recording studio called The Power Station and who produced and engineered for the likes of the Ramones, Gloria Gaynor, Ace Frehley, Aerosmith, Ozzy Osbourne, and even Jimi Hendrix. Before his cousin gave him a shot, which led to Bon Jovi recording their first song Runaway, which has been a staple in their live sets ever since, you know what Jon was doing? He was sweeping floors at this studio. He started from the bottom, just like all of us underprivileged simpletons do. Sure, he had a big connection, but he still grinded and came a long way from sweeping floors. It's a really inspiring thing to learn about, and it shows that you should never feel bad about starting small, or that you have no chance in hell at reaching your goals. I'm sure Jon had those exact thoughts and doubted himself a lot in the years before his cousin talked him up.
I'm just a man.
And even then, it took 3 albums to reach the top and graduate from opening for bands like Rat and the Scorpions to finally become a headliner. This did not happen overnight. He never gave up his dream, and neither should you. Wow, another moment where I tried to sound like Schaeferless. Along with creating music that I believe has aged wonderfully and that I love going back to, it's these reasons why I will always have an infinite amount of respect for Bon Jovi. Even if you might not be the biggest fan of their music, you at least gotta admit that Jon Bon Jovi is a swell motherfucker. So now here's the part at the end of the video where I ask you, the viewer, what's wrong with Bon Jovi? Please be rational when leaving your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and have a nice day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time. Bon Jovi!